welcome to my channel, and here's my how-to on how to replace the brake disc on a Honda. This is a Honda Insight 2010 second generation, but many other Hondas use the same type of actually exactly the same size front brakes, and those cars are like Honda Fit, Honda Civic, depending on generation and such, but this is a fairly common brake disc size, and the installation and the process is, this process is applicable to many Hondas. So the first thing that you do, you remove the wheel, and it's held in place by these 19mm nuts. So you need a breaker bar like this and a socket that is 19mm. So the next thing that you have to do, well, you have two options. Well, first of all, or second of all, you have to remove the brake caliper and get it out of the way, so you can remove the disc itself, get it off the hub. The disc is attached to the hub with two screws. These are flat head screws, and from the factory they have Phillips heads. Those you may fight because they rust in place. I already replaced them and I had to drill them out basically. So the next thing to do is you have to get the brake caliper out of the way. The brake caliper is attached to the hub with two bolts like this. This is a hex head, 17mm, and they are on the back side of the caliper. The best thing to get those bolts out, you have to have a breaker bar like this with a flex head or whatever, swivel head I guess, and a 17mm socket, because that's what the bolts are. That is a very long, or have an extension with a like a shorter socket with an extension, because this socket and a breaker bar go into the bolt like this, and it's going to actually, this breaker bar is going to swing like this, and you will have enough room to apply your torque. You might have something shorter and try to get inside of the wheel well, but that's not always convenient. So this is the top bolt, and you put the socket on with a breaker bar and just break the bolt and you loosen the bolt. Once that bolt starts spinning, you can actually use your hand or a ratchet or whatever and get that bolt out. The next bolt is on the bottom, and to get to that bolt you use your breaker bar in the same manner. You put it on the bottom bolt in such a way that you have, well, you will have enough room and all the freedom of applying torque to the bolt if you use exactly this size of breaker bar and a socket. So this one is approximately a 3 to 4 inch overall. So these are deep sockets, they are fairly common. So once you get those bolts out, the next thing to do is just pull the caliper off the brake disc. And if your disc has a lip, and most likely it will have a lip because you're replacing the disc and it's most likely worn down. For that you have to release the brake caliper, you have to release the brake piston, you have to push the brake piston in, and I already kind of did that a little bit because otherwise it's going to be stuck and the brake pads would not let the caliper to get off because they will actually hit the lip of on the edge of the disc. So you may use a screwdriver like this. You can stick it like, you can see how the center of the disc has the veins for the ventilation, and you can really safely stick a screwdriver in there. You basically just push the caliper in the direction of, well, basically you push it outward, and that will push the piston into the caliper. So once you do that, you have enough slope to actually pull the caliper off like this. And at this point I can show where these bolts go that hold the caliper onto the hub. These are the bolts, and they are sitting right here. This is one, this is another. On the top like that, that's two bolts. You basically just remove those. You also have an option, if you're replacing the brake pads, you may actually want to replace them at the same time with the disc. You have to undo this bolt right here and basically just swing the caliper out of the way, and that way you can break it down, take the pads out. That's an option, but I'm not doing the pads, so this is a floating type of a caliper. So you have two pins here and here that have to be in a good shape so the caliper still floats. If those rust in place, you will start having one pad wearing out much faster and the brakes will not function properly. So once you have the caliper off, you can put it aside. It's a good idea to use like a wire or something and hang it onto like your strut, but I'm okay if I lay it down on the lower control arm like that. It's not going to go anywhere, and the brake line is actually not strained in any way. So at this point you can get the disc off, and that's the point where you will have to struggle with these two screws. I most likely will not, because like I said, I already got these out at some point. I had to drill them out, and those are just a really small tiny screws like this. They are flat heads. You have two of those. That's why it's always a good idea to use stainless steel hardware that doesn't rust and doesn't really complicate your life. Once you get those two screws out, you can just get your brake disc off the hub, and that basically is it. And you can replace it at this point or resurface. Be prepared to deal with a lot of brake dust, and I already have some of it on the floor of the garage, and it's not always a bad idea to use gloves. But in a nutshell, this is all that takes to replace your brake disc on your Honda brake system front. So that basically is the process. So once you remove the old disc, you can clean things up, check the condition of the hub for damage and such, and just reinstall your new, or install your new discs, and put new screws in and reinstall the caliper and potentially replace the pads and so on. So these are the two ears that hold the caliper in place, and basically these bolts are they just go through like this. This is the top, this is the bottom. I hope you can see that on the camera. Well, at least the top one, it's really visible. It's right here. Well, these are sort of a special size bolts. If you lose one or destroy it or damage it, you better not do that, because you most likely will not be able to find it in a regular hardware store. If these are rusted in place, you must strip the heads and things like that, so be always prepared to deal with the replacement. So guys, that's pretty much it on this how-to. It's a fairly easy and straightforward job. There's nothing complicated about doing this. It's a Honda. Well, I shouldn't be saying that, but at least this part is not difficult. It's really typical to these Japanese cars. Hondas, Toyotas, Nissans, they are all fairly similar in the design. Like, the general idea is pretty much 100% identical on these cars, and I'm sure that these brake systems are manufactured by one company in many situations for many of these cars. So, and the calipers and so on, they are fairly similar. So that's pretty much it. This is it for now. Thanks for watching. Thanks for visiting my channel. Subscribe, like, dislike. So once you get those bolts out, you can just slide. It's never a bad idea to have some kind of a tray under this whole brake system hub and knuckle, because this thing will have a lot of brake dust. This is a fairly clean car. I have replaced the brakes on this, well, not that long ago, relatively. I kind of feel like these rotors are actually getting worn down, but these things usually have a lot of dust around, so be prepared to deal with the brake dust, and that dust is real obnoxious, in my opinion, in my experience.